Good morning. I'm Brian Curtis. Here are the stories we're following today. Israel and Hamas have agreed to extend the pause in fighting for another 10 days, and there are even more developments. Ed Baxter has the story from San Francisco. Ed?
Yeah, 2 more days, Brian, 2 more days. Israel says 11 more hostages returned today and says it has approved 50 female prisoners for possible release to Hamas. Now, that means until Thursday this week. More follows, more negotiations over the release of more hostages and prisoners. Bloomberg's Kaylee Lyons points out any pause is only temporary.
Even as we're talking about a ceasefire, a temporary one extending for whatever period of time, again, reportedly now an extra 2 days being tacked on to what was a 4-day ceasefire. Netanyahu has said repeatedly that at the end of this, the war will continue. The fighting will continue. He is going to keep going until Hamas is eliminated. So right now, the ceasefire is still very much temporary, even if it is just a little bit longer.
Yeah, with a pause extension, there are concerns. White House National Security spokesman John Kirby admits it does provide Hamas with an opportunity to regroup.
You have to expect a group like Hamas, a terrorist group, which clearly doesn't abide by laws of war, will try to take advantage of any pause in the fighting for their own benefit. So we're watching that closely, as well as our Israeli counterparts. You can bet that they're watching that closely.
But that said, he says the U.S. would like to see continued hostage release.
We would, of course, hope to see the pause extended further, and that will depend upon Hamas continuing to release hostages.
Yeah, and Secretary of State Antony Blinken says he will go back to Israel this week, his third visit since the war began, and will tie it to a visit to Dubai for COP28. So how does this affect the Israeli aid calculus in the U.S.? Well, that is Congress is expected to resume debate this week. Bloomberg's Jordan Fabian says, up in the air.
That's a shift. Before, in the beginning, when this was first proposed, said, we're going to help Israel, no strings attached. But since then, this offensive has taken place in Gaza. A lot of Palestinians have died. Whole cities have been leveled. And so the mood has turned among Democrats. They want to see some concessions here. But then the calculus gets tough because Republicans don't want to see concessions.
And Elon Musk has been in Israel touring and talking with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Bloomberg's Ed Ledlow.
Musk said that he'd like to help rebuild Gaza at the conclusion of the Israel-Hamas war. He basically said that he was disturbed by some of the images that he'd seen. You're looking at pictures there of Elon Musk with Benjamin Netanyahu.
Yeah, Musk also visiting Israel in the shadow of his anti-Semitic posts on X and the loss of a number of high-profile advertisers. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, taking credit for easing supply chain pressures and lowering inflation today, says, but more needs to be done.
Let me be clear. To any corporation that's not brought their prices back down, even as inflation has come down, even as supply chains have been rebuilt, it's time to stop the price gouging and give the American consumer a break.
Yeah, Biden also says he set up a council to review supply chain actions, calling it an early warning system. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now in San Francisco. I'm Ed Baxter, and this is Bloomberg. Brian.
Ed, thanks very much. Brian Curtis and Vonnie Quinn, of course, Ed Baxter on news. Now it's time for the top business and economic stories. Saudi Arabia is asking others in OPEC Plus to reduce their oil production quotas. We get the story from Bloomberg's Ann Cates.
Saudi Arabia has been making a largely unilateral supply cutback of 1 million barrels a day since July and is now seeking further support from other OPEC Plus members, but some countries are resisting. The 23-nation alliance faces pressure to intervene in crude markets following a 17% drop in prices over the past 2 months amid plentiful stockpiles and a darkening economic backdrop. The oil market could weaken even more in 2024 with forecasts of a new supply surplus. In Washington, Ann Cates, Bloomberg Radio.
Online shoppers are clicking their way to big savings for Cyber Monday, and this comes as buy now, pay later features are letting shoppers stretch their budgets with credit. Bloomberg's Spencer Soper says expectations are high.
Earlier, they were predicting about $12 billion in sales, and that's from Adobe, which monitors insights from like hundreds of millions of transactions. They've upped that to $12.4 billion now, based on the strength of the consumer on Black Friday and through the weekend. They're seeing the consumer being more resilient.
That's Bloomberg's Spencer Soper there. The holiday weekend already saw record online spending. Black Friday sales topped analyst projections at $9.8 billion. That's up 7.5% from a year ago. The National Retail Federation estimates 182 million people will have shopped in-store and online from Thanksgiving Day through the end of Cyber Monday.
Meantime, Amazon's proposed acquisition of iRobot has hit a potential snag in Europe. More from Bloomberg's Samuel Stolten.
The European Commission has issued what is known as a statement of objections. And this effectively means that the Commission outlines a series of anti-competitive concerns with the merger. It doesn't necessarily prejudge the outcome of the investigation, but it calls upon the firms to address some of those anti-competitive concerns or risk the deal being derailed.
That's Bloomberg's Samuel Stolten, and the shares were hammered. I'll get to the numbers for you in a moment. Last week, Reuters had reported that Amazon and iRobot appeared on the cusp of winning unconditional approval from the European Commission. At that time, the stock jumped. But today, iRobot shares down 17%, the biggest intraday drop in nearly 3 years.
Reddit is leading a class of 2024 candidates testing the waters for an initial public offering in the United States. We're told the social media company is again holding talks with potential investors for an IPO. And that IPO could come as soon as the first quarter. Last year, we reported that Reddit was working with Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs on the listing. Separately, we hear Rubrik, a Microsoft-backed cloud and data security startup, is also considering holding its IPO as soon as in the first quarter. And we're told Kim Kardashian's Skims underwear label is discussing strategy options, including an IPO that could come as soon as next year.
And the Wall Street Journal reported just an hour or so ago that the fast fashion Chinese company Shein has confidentially filed for a U.S. IPO. Well, China's central bank says it will press the country's banks to lower real lending rates. Bloomberg's Yvonne Mann has the story in Hong Kong.
The central bank's position is clear. Deflation has effectively pushed up borrowing costs in price-adjusted terms, and that has stoked concerns that real debt burdens will rise, undermining growth. As a result, it wants banks to do more to smooth out volatility in their lending activity. That said, in its third quarter monetary policy report, the PBOC played down concerns about deflation. It said, don't read too much into single-month credit data. A recent Bloomberg survey showed economists expect China to wait until early next year to lower policy rates after 2 cuts this year. In Hong Kong, I'm Yvonne Mann, Bloomberg Radio.
iPhone maker Hon Hai is expanding its footprint in India with another $1.6 billion investment. Bloomberg's Joanne Wong has more from Hong Kong.
Hon Hai says the huge budgeted expense will be used for construction projects and what it calls operational needs. But the company did not identify any locations. Hon Hai is among many firms looking to diversify its business outside of China due to geopolitical concerns. In September, the company said on LinkedIn it planned to double the size of its business in India. Foxconn already operates 9 production campuses there, and sales in the country run to about $10 billion annually. In Hong Kong, I'm Joanne Wong, Bloomberg Radio.
Joining us now on the program is Larry Liebert, Bloomberg editor on the International Economics and Security team at Bloomberg, to discuss the latest with Israel and Hamas. Larry, great to have you with us. The pause is a good thing. Let's hope it continues. Can we make the jump in saying, I mean, we don't know what both sides are thinking, but can we sort of guess that both sides are a bit tired of fighting, but there's just no easy way out?
That's exactly true. And they're tired enough, at least for the moment, that they're extending their agreement to swap hostages for prisoners. And today, as planned, there was another exchange. 11 freed hostages arrived in Israel, and in the rather elaborate 1-to-3 ratio of these deals, 33 Palestinians were released from imprisonment by Israel. But the lasting impact of this, goes to the question you suggest, is everybody's found it in their interest to extend this for 2 more days. So rather than ending tomorrow, it'll go through Thursday. Is there hope after that? President Biden and others certainly say so, and they also emphasize the improvement, not enough, UN experts would tell you, but an improvement in the delivery of humanitarian supplies to Gaza.
How are the calculations made, though, Larry? Because if Israel is declaring that it will not stop until every last Hamas member and supporter is gone, then presumably these prisoners don't have very long, right, according to Israel's logic?
Well, yes, but Israel's political logic is also that all or almost all of these hostages are Israelis, and there's a very strong political movement in Israel that they must be brought back. And so that provides an incentive. But yes, Israel said it can't just end this and leave Hamas in place to attack again. And Hamas says it's not giving up. So this clearly isn't a permanent solution to anything, but the extension of it suggests everybody's interest for the moment in extending it. And I'd also add that everybody's got a spin on this. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel, his office issued a statement that Israel welcomed back our 11 abducted citizens. Well, Qatar, which has served a crucial intermediary role, didn't describe them as Israelis taking advantage of their dual citizenship. It described these as 3 French citizens, 2 Germans, and 6 Argentinians who were released today. So everybody has an angle. Everybody has so far an incentive to continue playing this very important game, but there's clearly an end in sight at some point.
Larry, there's a massive imbalance in those killed. Hamas says some 15,000 Gazans, and Israelis say that 1,200 Israelis were killed in the initial attacks by Hamas. I'm wondering, I just want to get your thoughts on this. I talked about this with Michael Heath, one of our colleagues, yesterday. Does that suggest in any way more or less likelihood that Israel would agree to a longer pause? And if you could also add to that, what does it say about the international position here and the pressure coming from other countries?
Well, I think there is a lot of pressure. Now, Israel would tell you that, first of all, at the beginning of this, Hamas, in a surprise attack, killed the most Israelis who were butchered, murdered since the Holocaust. That's an existential question for them. Their response, though, has not met with the approval of the world community because they have killed many times that of civilians in Gaza. And they say, with I think clearly some truth, that it is in part because Hamas burrows under and has this extraordinary series of tunnels under the civilian population. But still, the idea that they're using such large bombs, U.S. supplied in many cases, and that it's causing so many civilian casualties has not gained favor in the world community.
Larry, how much does Hamas know about all of the hostages? So there seems to be suggestion that some are lost, or
yeah. Well, they may know that some have died. They also there also have been some indications that there are other terrorist offshoots that may have grabbed some of them, and they may not have complete leeway to deal for them, and so we may not get to the end of this, even if everyone wanted to keep extending it with all of the hostages freed and with all of them alive. That's one of the mysteries and one of the sad parts of this whole.
You mentioned U.S. munitions, and we talked about the imbalance in the number of dead. Are you hearing anything about from Congress or the administration about conditionality being placed on Israel in terms of future conduct of this war?
Well, there certainly have been some questions raised by some Democrats, liberal Democrats especially, and even I think the president made some passing remark. It may not have been quite what some people read into it, suggesting that the U.S. is concerned about providing weapons and how they're used, and will or should place some constraints on it. The problem, again, is on the other side is Israel would say we can't get to those underground tunnels and we can't get to those leaders with lightweight weapons. And that's the great dilemma at this point.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, your morning brief on the stories making news from Hong Kong to Singapore and Wall Street. Look for us on your podcast feed every day on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. You can also listen live each day on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco. Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, SiriusXM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Brian Curtis. Join us again tomorrow for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.